Golden State Media Concepts bring you Book Review Podcast, a haven for bookworms of all ages and the widest genres, from mystery to memoirs, romance to comedy, fantasy to sci-fi. If you love to read, this is a podcast for you. It's the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast.
Hello and welcome to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, brought to you by the GSMC Podcast Network. I am your host, Sarah, and as always, I am very happy to be with you here on another Tuesday episode of the podcast. And of course, that means I do have an interview. I am speaking today with author Michael C. Bland about his new novel, The Price of Safety. I had a kind of crazy, hectic weekend, and was it crazy and hectic, or did it just feel crazy and hectic? I'm not sure. Does it matter? But I feel like the weekend just went whooshing by, and I had too much stuff and not enough time and all of those wonderful things, and that actually is going to play into part of this interview later, and I'll get to that later. We'll get to that later. I have to shake my head and confess things to you. At any rate, the interview is with Michael C. Bland about his novel, The Price of Safety. By 2047, no crime in America goes unsolved. No wrongdoing goes unseen. When Dray Quintero learns his 19-year-old daughter, Raven, committed a heinous act, he covers it up to save her life. This pits him against the police he's respected since he was a child and places him in the crosshairs of Kieran, a ruthless federal agent. To survive, Dray must overcome the surveillance system he helped build and the technology implanted in people's heads, for everyone has a microcomputer in their brain and computer screen lenses in their eyes. Forced to turn to a domestic terrorist group to protect his family, as they're the only ones willing to fight the government, Dray tries to resist joining their cause, but can't avoid it, for his adversaries have a level of control he's unable to escape, that no one can. Hunted and betrayed, with time running out, Dray must choose between saving Raven and dismantling the near-perfect society he helped to create. So there you have the description of The Price of Safety. Again, the author is Michael C. Bland. You've got a little bit of a futuristic book because it is in 2047. That's only 27 years from now, which is, I don't know, that sounds a little bit crazy to me sometimes when I think about it. You have got a little bit of science fiction. You've got, I don't know if you would call this a dystopian or utopian society. Probably depends on which part of it you're living in. It's one of those books where you may think it's utopian until you come up against the situation that Dray and Raven and their family find themselves in, and then it's probably going to seem a lot more dystopian to you. There is, of course, a science fiction aspect in it, as we have lots of interesting technology and, you know, the implants in people's brains and eyes, and I don't know. I will still be alive, hopefully. I can't say that for sure, of course, but I potentially could still be alive in 2047. I won't be that old. And I don't want this to be the future. I don't think I want computer screen lenses in my eyes or a computer in my brain. Maybe that will change, but right now, just not sure that is my cup of tea. The book is, it's got levels of thriller. Like I said, it's got levels of elements of science fiction and family relationships. Those are very important in the book as they struggle as a family to overcome everything that they are being thrown into. They had family issues actually before all of this even started, so those play into the family dynamics, and there's just a lot of different levels going on here in the book. But essentially, it really is Dray realizing that this seemingly perfect society that he helped to create by designing a lot of the tech for it is maybe not as perfect as he had thought or hoped in the beginning. So let's go ahead and turn to that interview with Michael C. Bland. Again, the book is called The Price of Safety. Hi, Michael. Welcome to the podcast.
Thank you. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate it.
I am happy to have you here, and we are going to talk about your book, The Price of Safety. Before the book, though, if you could just tell us a little bit about yourself so my listeners can get to know you.
Sure. Maybe start with a couple fun facts. My first job out of college included repossessing cars, which was very entertaining.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, a lot of stories from that. I took 3 years of Russian in college and lived in Russia for a summer, which included seeing Lenin in his tomb and generating the ability to drink vodka like it was water. And during a visit to West Point, I snuck into some restricted areas. I think I even still have a photograph of that. But as far as writing side, I started writing a little over 10 years ago. I took classes at the University of Iowa. I'm also a founding member of BookPod, which is a group of professional writers, filmmakers, editors. We have someone who writes for Grey's Anatomy, has award-winning filmmaker, a lot of incredible people. Price of Safety is my first novel, which I'm proud to say I was named a finalist recently by the Indie Book Awards in not one but two categories, science fiction and thriller.
That's wonderful. Congratulations.
Thank you.
And I want to go off on on separate
Sure.
tangents for those. No. I mean, we can spend the whole podcast talking about your three fun facts, but see, now I'm picturing you as Dog the Bounty Hunter, even though that's not what he did. But that.
And I don't have the mullet. I don't have the hair. So.
Come on.
No, I can't pull it off.
I don't know that he does either, but
I don't know if anybody does, but I'm not going to tell him that.
No. Okay, so we will actually talk about the book. That's what you're here for. So can you give an overview of The Price of Safety?
Absolutely. The Price of Safety is set in a world where technology is so prevalent that no crime goes unsolved. When Dray Quintero's 19-year-old daughter Raven commits a capital crime, he covers it up to save her life. This starts him down a rabbit hole where he discovers that nothing is as he thought it was. And actually, it takes place in Los Angeles and San Francisco.
Yeah, and that that is an accurate description, and yet wow, there's so much that happens to this family, and that's kind of the premise of most stories like this, is that you're living your life and you think you kind of have a handle on the world until something happens, and then everything goes crazy.
Yeah.
What was your initial inspiration for the story?
So when I lived in Chicago, I would ride the L subway almost every day, and the other passengers were just all staring at their phones. And I'm like, I could just walk around naked. Not that anyone would want that, but I could walk around naked and no one would see, no one would notice. Yet on the ceiling of the cab are cameras. So while no one was watching, someone's always watching and monitoring and tracking, and especially more and more nowadays. And that was what inspired me to come up with the price of safety. We as a society, we've accepted really kind of being watched and tracked and monitored virtually at all times. And I mean, right now, and while that comes with a price, so far it seems to be minor. Some targeted ads. Okay, if yes, I like to hike, and so you want to show me ads for hiking shoes, fine. But one day that price is going to possibly could become too much.
Yeah, and I really liked your phrase. Well, no one is watching. Someone's always watching, and we don't think about that much, especially now. We're not going to get into politics and crazy, but the world is crazy right now, and
Yeah.
someone's always filming. There's cameras. There's stuff that records most things these days.
And as a very quick tangent with that, to add on to that is they're talking about tracking software, and I know Apple and Android, they're talking about having tracking software in some areas in some countries are using that. And South Korea actually recently used that in a very effective way to contain some of the spread of the virus after they started opening up. And while that is great and it's a positive use of the technology, the back of my mind as I'm reading about these efforts and these plans and implementation, I'm kind of thinking, is this kind of the starting point of possibly what becomes my story?
Yeah, it's a slippery slope
Yep.
from that's a good use of that technology to okay, where does it end?
Yes. Yeah. How far does it go?
Yeah. Now, this book is set in the future, but not that far in the future. It's set in 2047. I could still be alive in 2047, so I hope it doesn't look like this in 2047. But
You never know.
why did you choose that particular year?
Well, one of the reasons is exactly what your response was in terms of, this actually I could still be alive and possibly experience this. But I wanted to have a story that was relatable, that it wasn't so far in the future where there are aliens and there's all this in technology that you can't relate to. And then I also was like, okay, well, if I want to go in the future, how far? And what I used was, okay, what was life like 30 years ago? 30 years ago, Amazon didn't exist. DVDs didn't exist. We're all still watching movies on VCR tapes and going to Blockbuster. Palm Pilot, wasn't out. Cell phones were bricks, and all they did was they made calls. Look how far we've come in 30 years to where in the palm of our hand we can access the depth and breadth of the internet, and we can track where we are, find where we are on a map, and reach out to people in multiple ways: video calls, text, all that stuff. And the technology also is increasing; it's speeding up as we get better and better with the technology. So from there, I went, okay, what's that going to be like in 30 years, speeding up? So that was with the original inspiration of, with no one watching it, everyone could be watching. You sit there and go, well, if the technology does speed up, and look, technology is a tool; it can be used for good or ill, right? So, of course, the story is boring if it's only used for good. So that's then where you have to then take kind of the dark side to it. But that was what drove me, or that was the reason why I chose 2047, because it was far enough in the future where the technology could get past our ability to control or to avoid, yet to be relatable.
We're going to go ahead and take a break here, but I wonder what you think about that setting of 2047 and what you envision the world to look like. People keep making jokes about we don't have flying cars, the Jetsons look like this, or, all the movies and sci-fi shows that came before that depicted the future, and we've passed those future points, and things may or may not have come to pass. And then you look at Star Trek and some of the technology you see there, you see now. I don't know. It's just, I think it's fascinating. But since this is only 27 years in the future, what do you think the world will look like? What do you think technology will look like? I'm curious to find out. You can definitely hit me up on social media or in the comments here and tell me what you envision the world to be in 27 or 30 years, if you want a rounder number. Let's go ahead and take that break. When we come back, we'll be talking more about The Price of Safety by Michael C. Bland.
Are you tired of the same old news? Are you sick of the seemingly endless political spin and negativity? The GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast is a weekly news podcast covering all the top positive and uplifting news stories. We cover stories that will inspire, uplift, and remind you of the good in the world. Tune into the Golden State Media Concepts America Still Beautiful podcast to get all the great and positive news stories of today. Download the GSMC America Still Beautiful podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, Google Play, or anywhere you find podcasts. Just type GSMC in the search bar.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast. Before the break, Michael had just finished talking about the time frame for the book, which is 2047, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that and some of the things that, of course, happen in this book. So let's go ahead and get back to the interview. Yeah, I often think what are our children going to experience? What's technology going to be like when they're middle-aged? How far is it going to come? And are things going to be implanted? Can you talk a little bit about the technology that is part of all humans in this story, and how you came up with those ideas?
Absolutely. Part of my idea with watching people on their cell phone, and I'm as guilty as everybody else, but the more that we've gotten to the point where in the palm of our hand we can access everything. Well, with the technology continuing on, where is that leading to? It could get to a point where, and Google Glass kind of had an idea with it where it's projected onto the screen of your glasses, taking it then another step past that. And if you're familiar with cataract surgery, where if the lenses in your eyes get covered over with film, there's now, and we've been doing this for decades now, I believe, where you can pull out the lens in your eye and put a new one in. Well, what if that one has a clear computer screen, and then you can broadcast onto that screen? And with that is a very small implant in your temple that basically becomes your own personal computer. It has everything you learned in classes in college. It hooks to your employer's network. It allows you to have this depth and breadth of ability even more than we have right now. So it ends up being woven into the very fabric of your life and how you act and how you interact, not only with each other, but with your employer, with your knowledge base, everything else, because it's all in a small, very, very small computer in your head.
Yeah, and I don't want to give too much away, but there's a point when something happens to Dray's daughter's implant, and they're talking about, well, she is maybe going to be okay, but her, everything that was in her implant, her passwords, her all of these things, her calendar, all of the stuff that we have on different devices is now gone. And so, her memories are still there, but all of this information is gone because her implant is not there.
Right. It becomes a part of you. It really becomes, in a way nowadays, if you don't have your smart device phone, you might feel kind of lost. Well, if you have this implant that merges everything and how you interact with almost every facet of your life is hands-free, it's a part of you. It's literally a small piece inside of you. How much do you rely and depend on it, and then you lose that? How difficult is that then to interact and to live in this kind of world?
Yeah. So let's talk about Dray, the main character. Can you talk about him a little bit, and what about him might resonate with readers?
For Dray, one of the biggest thing is how much he cares about his family. His family means everything to him, and protecting them is what drives him. And I wanted that to be the core of him, because that not only drives the story, but it's a universal desire, and it's something that I also wanted to be very relatable with readers. And that, in my own humble opinion, is one of the biggest the biggest struggles in terms of sci-fi novels in general is it going to be relatable? You have a whole bunch of strange worlds and aliens and technology that isn't even you can't even really fathom. While that's fascinating in a way, it's hard to relate on a daily basis. But one of the things I really wanted with this story is to be centered on family, and with Dray as the main character, his need and desire and want to protect his daughters over everything else. And so that's what I crafted the whole story around. And many of the people that have read my story have talked about just the heart that's in the story. And that was key to me, because the technology is great and fun and all that. It's almost like Star Wars, which I, of course, love Star Wars. And while the lightsabers, which I still would love to actually have a lightsaber, all the technology is really cool and great and everything, but if you don't have the heart of the characters in it, it just becomes, I don't know, just a kind of basic story. So for me, having Dray and having someone who cares that much about his family, that was important to me. And now what also then adds to it is that he actually helped create this world. He helped create some of the software that is the technology that's used to track everybody. So he not only is in this position where he's having to save his daughter, protect his family, but he actually helped create it.
Yeah, so that adds that extra layer of complexity, I guess, would be a good word for it.
Right. Yeah, he has to confront what he's created and battle those that are using it against him.
Yeah. Now, the older daughter, Raven, is the catalyst in a lot of ways to this story, but I actually want to ask you about the younger daughter,
Yeah.
who I think needs her own book.
She's fantastic. Yeah, I love her.
I don't know what to say more about her, but she just needs her own book.
I appreciate that. I'll keep that in mind. Yeah, she is a lot of fun. She's definitely one of those characters. As I would write her, she would definitely kind of take over a little bit, which is always fun and hilarious. So.
Yeah, I can imagine that she would, and I think that she gives her fictional parents gray hair on a regular basis.
Yeah, I think they both do to different degrees. I definitely wanted them to be their own characters and with their own opinions and desires. And yeah, I definitely didn't want any character in the story to be a wallflower. They are all opinionated and active and resourceful.
Yes. How much research then did you do for the book?
Well, because we are talking 24/7, we are talking science fiction, so that's obviously where I focus the research, and I really dug into the latest achievements in robotics, technology, computing, visual technology, and fusion research to not only get a baseline of where we are, but then to get ideas of where we would be in 24/7. Because then I'm taking the what's known and then leaping into the unknown, and definitely wanted to make sure to avoid, that leap where some stories it's like the author stretched a little too much, or I don't know, got lazy, or it just didn't work for their plot. Where there was this leap that, as a reader, I would lose that world that the author created, and so I really wanted to try to avoid that. So I want to try to make it as believable and as connected as possible to where we are now. Now, I admit I did also read some articles that predicted the future, and not to read about the flying cars we're all supposed to have, but to gather ideas of what might be possible. And also even dug into theories on dark matter, which is something that also just fascinates me because we don't know much about it yet. It's such a large part of the universe, and so I crafted some of my own theories based on that research, and then used that building my story.
Yeah, where are our flying cars?
Right. I know.
Everything predicted. The Jetsons had flying cars. We do not.
Yeah, I'm a little disappointed in us. I think we could all do better.
We could do better. Although, I don't know. Do we really trust people with flying cars?
Well, I mean, I did kind of, try to picture traffic with a whole bunch of flying cars. That could end up being really ugly. A lot of wrecks.
Yes. Are there any autobiographical elements within the book?
Not myself directly. However, I was inspired by my grandfathers because they were both engineers. One was a chemical engineer that built bombs during World War II in Texas, and the other one was a structural engineer that helped build battleships in New York City Harbor during World War II. Really admired them both. They're both extremely intelligent. And so Dray, the main character, he's an engineer, partly in homage to them, and also partly because it worked very well in the story.
Okay, and did you mention what do you do in your daily life for work when you're not writing?
So my daily life, I'm actually in finance. I'm a chief operating officer for a company that provides millions of dollars of loans to businesses across the country.
Okay.
So
okay.
yeah, definitely the numbers finance side on one part of my brain, and then writing on the other. And there's nothing about finance or loans or anything in my book because that's not really interesting at all to read about. Trust me, doing it for a living, it's not that interesting.
Right. I was just curious if you had followed in your grandfather's footsteps and become an engineer as well.
I kind of wish that I had. I really I think it'd be fascinating. And that's also, I think, part of the drive of this book is to have a character who is an engineer, have the ability to take things, create it, improve it, know how it works, make it better. It's fascinating to me. And I did have a good friend of mine is an engineer, and so I had him as one of my readers, my beta readers for this book, to make sure there's some authenticity with the engineering side as well as the attitude of the engineer and that kind of thing.
All right, let's go ahead and take another break here for the podcast. When we come back, we'll be talking about what's next for Michael, what he is working on now. So stay tuned. You're listening to the GSMC Book Review Podcast, and I'll be right back.
Tired of searching the vast jungle of podcasts? Now listen close and hear this out. There's a podcast network that covers just about everything that you've been searching. The Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network is here. Nothing less than a podcast bliss with endless hours of podcast coverage. From news, sports, music, fashion, cooking, entertainment, fantasy, football, and so much more. So stop lurking around and go straight out to the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. Guaranteed to fill that podcast itch. Whatever it may be. Visit us at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Follow us on Facebook and Twitter, and download us on iTunes, SoundCloud, and Google Play.
Welcome back to the GSMC Book Review Podcast and my interview with Michael C. Bland about his novel, The Price of Safety. Let's go ahead and return to that interview. Are you working on anything right now?
Yes, I'm actually in the midst of the sequel for The Price of Safety. Been working on the plot for over a year, and I'm in the middle of the rough draft. And next, after this interview, I'm going to go back to that. So, in the story, when I first started creating The Price of Safety, I didn't plan on it being a trilogy. I just planned on it as a story, beginning, middle, end. And it wasn't until as I was creating it and fashioning it, and then I realized that it's a starting point of a larger story. I mean, don't get me wrong, Price of Safety doesn't end on a cliffhanger. It's a beginning, middle, and end. But to me, the analogy is, in my mind at least, is, the movie The Matrix, where Neo becomes the one and ends up winning in the end. Well, and then he has that call in the phone booth and says, hey, I don't know where this is going to go. I don't know what's going to happen next, but, hang on, basically. So, and that was kind of the kind of analogy is Dray goes through his journey, him and his family, and at the end, he's completed that journey, but then there's what happens next. And that's what the sequel's about.
So we will get more Talia. And more, obviously more of the story, but I don't know. She just intrigues me. I can't help it.
I love that. That's great. Thank you. That's a compliment. If a character resonates, that's huge.
Yeah. On your website, you have another work called Lawyers Can't Fly. Do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure. Lawyers Can't Fly. It's an action comedy about a young attorney who gets tricked into becoming the exclusive lawyer for superheroes because they get tired of getting sued every time they super sneeze and destroy property, and he doesn't want anything to do with it because, well, normal people end up getting smushed and hurt and everything whenever they're around superheroes. But a large superhero in spandex is kind of hard to ignore, and so they trick him to becoming their lawyer, and then Ben's life quickly turns upside down as he's dragged into their crazy world. But then supers start to disappear. One ends up dead, and before he knows it, this young attorney becomes their only hope for survival. So it has elements of The Boys, the series that's on Amazon, but not in like a jaded way. So the superheroes in this story, Mighty Man and Warrior Woman and Splinter and others, they mean well, they want to help, but just because you have superpowers doesn't mean that you're any more emotionally or psychologically balanced than the rest of us. So you get someone, that is having a really bad day and they can, blast someone with their eyes. That's not always going to go well. So, because there's no really instruction manual for being a superhero. So that was kind of the idea with it. And it's a really fun, humorous take. and I was able to had the opportunity to pitch the idea to Columbia Pictures. Um, so that was really kind of a fun thing. It was through this Wizard World Fest, and you could apply online to submit for it, and in 3 different cities: Portland, Columbus, and Philadelphia. And I was one of the ones selected for Columbus, just one of about a dozen people. And then after I did the pitch session, you know, they gave you 5 minutes, and I stole about 7, but it was a great fun experience. They laughed at the jokes, and they went aw in the parts that I hoped they would, and then about a week later they asked for a copy of the whole thing. So they have my story right now.
Wow, that is really exciting. And actually, I love the concept because whenever you watch a superhero movie, it seems like the big battle at the end, stuff is just destroyed everywhere.
Yeah.
New York City is destroyed. Washington, D.C., all the monuments are destroyed. And seriously, thanks for saving everybody, but could you maybe have not been quite so destructive?
Exactly. A little less destructive, maybe try a game of cards to see who wins. Something like that. But yeah, exactly. So that, and especially with then it falling on this young attorney, this guy who, isn't just a normal person like you and me, and he's now the only one that could possibly try to save these superheroes. I thought that was a really fun kind of way, and that they're all dependent on him.
Yeah, I love it. So you mentioned that you do finance in one part of your life and you write in another part of your life. When did you start writing? Is it something that you've always wanted to do, or did you pursue that later in life?
It was more later in life, especially I have to admit, after going through college and getting my first job, and it ends involving repossessing cars for a living. You kind of go, wait, what am I doing with my life? Why did I go to this 4-year college? Which was a great college, and kind of went, but it definitely makes you kind of reevaluate a little bit. And obviously, I'm not repossessing cars anymore, but it still did make me take a step back and go, what is really important to me? What is it I really love to do? And storytelling is what I've always enjoyed and gravitated towards. And it's to the point now that even if I wanted to stop, and never got published ever again, I would still write just for me. That's my enjoyment. Or I win the lottery tomorrow, this is what I'll be doing, is writing. That's what I love.
Mm-hmm. From your particular perspective, then, do you have advice for aspiring authors?
One of the biggest things is I would really recommend that they get at least another fellow writer who they can work with to hone their craft. While I was doing well, I was blessed to become really good friends with a gentleman by the name of Robert Kerbeck, whose first novel, Malibu Burning, came out last year. It's a great book. I recommend it. And he's had dozens of short stories published. One of his was adapted into a short film. He was a professional actor for 20 plus years. Well, we became friends at one of the University of Iowa workshops. And my relationship with him has really elevated my writing, because for the aspiring author, you really need to get someone who not only is a fellow writer and knows what you go through, but can give you the most honest, blunt, clear advice, feedback of your writing. Because writing can be great, it can be fun, but you really need to push to that next level. And not getting feedback and not getting the one-on-one, or you're part of a small group and you all trust each other that you are there to help each other, that's what then pushes you to the next level. You really elevated my writing. You get to the point where you're pushing each other to consider every sentence, every word that's used. And it can be painful, but it really pushes your writing and improves you.
Thank you for that. When you take the time to read for yourself, who are your favorite authors, or what genres do you gravitate to?
I do gravitate more towards science fiction. It's something, and my father grew up a huge science fiction geek, and I think that kind of is part of the reason why I got into it so much. He would have Isaac Asimov, and also Heimlin, Stranger in a Strange Land, and others just laying around the house. And so that's what I would read starting at a young age. I'm still a fan of Asimov. Also, Pierce Brown, the Red Rising series, fantastic series. Recommend that, especially the tone and of the main character is just amazing. And it's not just science fiction, also Terry Goodkind, the Sort of Truth series. I'm a big fan of that. Haven't read the last 2 or 3, but I've read virtually every single other one. And then, those are the main ones that can jump to mind.
Well, let me just say that is an impressive commitment to Terry Goodkind, because they're, I mean, those are not small books.
No, they are not. And they, each one, like, wow, I can't imagine writing a story that large. It's pretty...
And keeping track of everything, and yeah.
It is impressive. Like I said, I haven't read the last few, just been, like you said, wrapped up in own writing between that and life and everything else. But
right.
They are, the 2 main characters are 2 of my favorite. They're great, Richard and Kaylin.
Yeah. I know you have a website, so if you can share the address of your website as well as where people can interact with you on social media, if you have any.
Absolutely. Website is easy. It's mcbland.com, which, just a very quick funny aside, because I do that. I publish as Michael C. Bland because if you Google Michael Bland, he's a prior drummer for Prince, and I'm not nearly that cool. So that's why Michael C. Bland, right? I know. I was like, seriously? That's pretty impressive. So, and that's why mcbland at .com. I'm on Facebook, MC Bland Writer, Twitter at MC Bland Writer, Instagram, I'm on Goodreads. You can all link it from the website, as well as learn about me and hopefully buy a copy and all of that. Yeah. Or books also, Price of Safety is also available not only Amazon, Barnes & Noble, but should be your local bookstore as well. And if not, you always just ask for it and get it there.
All right. Well, Michael, we've talked about a variety of topics, but is there anything that we haven't talked about that you would like to mention now in terms of your writing?
Well, I'm really proud of the Price of Safety. It's the beginning of it's a story and beginning of a larger story that I think is really going to resonate with people. It's fast-paced, has heart, and it's a reflection of where we might go as a society for good and ill. Right? It is just beginning.
All right. Well, thank you so much. I really appreciate you taking the time to talk to me about the Price of Safety and all kinds of other fun topics. Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me on. This has been great. I really appreciate it.
Thank you once again to Michael for joining me to talk about the Price of Safety. Of course, I always appreciate all the authors who come on the podcast to talk with me. I appreciate you as well, my listeners. Okay, here is my confession. I'm so mad at myself. Okay, so I said the last weekend was pretty crazy. The week before was a little bit crazy and hectic as well, and I got overscheduled. It was my own fault for interviews and got behind on my reading. So I hadn't actually finished The Price of Safety by the time that Michael and I spoke over the weekend. So if you've read the book and you were listening to this interview, you were probably thinking, this woman is an idiot. How does she not know X, Y, and Z about this book? Michael was very kind. He did not correct me on the part that I was confused about because I had not finished the book. He was very kind to not point that out to me. I appreciate that. But my apologies to him for not knowing what I should have known in this interview. And I know that's vague, but I do not want to give away what I did not know if you have not read the book. If you have read the book, you probably know what I'm talking about, and feel free to roll your eyes. Totally understandable. Yeah, okay, I got that off my chest. Thank you for your patience, Michael, and for joining me for the podcast. As always, thank you to you, my listeners. If you are a fan of this podcast, even though the host can be a dork and doesn't finish books on time, please do give us a nice review, whether that's written or 5 stars. As always, that helps us to get the podcast out to more people who love books as much as we do. Also follow us on social media, Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can tell me what you think the world's going to look like in 2047. You can tell me what you're reading. You can tell me that I'm a dork. Whatever it is that you feel like you need to tell me. Although, maybe please be kind about telling me I'm a dork. I don't need any trolls in my life right now. Well, really, who does? If you are someone who welcomes trolls in your life, hey, that's interesting. I am not one of them. At any rate, please interact on social media. Hope you are having a wonderful week so far. Please join me again on Friday when I am speaking to author Pat McKee about his new book, Ariel's Island. The book we just talked about today, The Price of Safety, is set in 2047. Ariel's Island is more contemporary, but it deals with maybe not completely similar issues, but this does involve technology and artificial intelligence and some interesting questions about artificial intelligence. So it's a legal thriller. So join me on Friday as I speak with author Pat McKee. In the meantime, once again, I hope you're having a wonderful week. Hope that week continues to be wonderful. Hope it's not too hot wherever you're living. It's definitely getting to be summer here. Not my favorite time of the year. I like the air conditioning, I guess. So I will stay inside and I will read. I hope you can do the same thing and get yourself lost in a good book. Thanks.
You've been listening to the Golden State Media Concepts Book Review Podcast, part of the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network. You can find this show and others like it at www.gsmcpodcast.com. Download our podcast on iTunes, Stitcher, SoundCloud, and Google Play. Just type in GSMC to find all the shows from the Golden State Media Concepts Podcast Network, from movies to music, from sports to entertainment, and even weird news. You can also follow us on Twitter and on Facebook. Thank you, and we hope you have enjoyed today's program.